Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name's Rob. I'm the director of this, and if you don't know who this is, you probably haven't been paying attention, or you're in the wrong theatre. So we're just going to chat for a bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, see what comes out.
So someone had the idea, when I had to do an interview a while back, and Andrew read it and said that he could get more out of me in 10 short answer questions than the interviewer had got out of me in, what, like 6 pages or something crazy. And so then we made this deal that we would do 10 short answer questions, and someone didn't do it. So we've only got one set of questions.
That we're both going to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah?
I think so.
Just like, they're not really to do with Hamlet, they're just to kind of get us started, to make us feel relaxed, to make you feel relaxed. And then we will talk about Hamlet, and then at the end we'll take some questions from you guys. Richard or Judy?
I would go for Judy. And I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. I think Judy has been upstaged slightly by her slightly more flamboyant partner. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have her own flamboyance. I think she's intelligent. And I think she's probably very patient. What about you?
I hear all of that. I think I'd go Richard, only because of risk. I feel like the Ali G thing was risk. If you weren't an actor, what job would you do?
I'd be an artist, a painter.
What is your favourite non-theatre related work of art?
Oh, I love David Hockney.
Specific?
I suppose the LA, all the LA stuff. His drawings of his mum are beautiful. I love his life drawings.
Favourite childhood book?
What about you? What's your answer to that?
What favourite non-theatre work of art? I mean, in terms of narrative art, I think it's probably, at the moment, it's kind of The Sopranos again, because I'm rewatching it.
Yeah.
In terms of visual art, I think if I could own one, I'd own a Monet. I'd own a big water lily Monet.
Well, you were just there, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, properly amazing. He built, did I tell you the story that he built? I didn't know that Monet built the water lilies lake. And we were having a whole moment about this, about how it wasn't a lake that he painted, it was that he decided he wanted to paint a lake and so designed and built a lake.
Extraordinary.
There's sort of something about that that's extraordinary.
It's amazing.
How do you take your tea?
I don't drink tea or coffee, as you well know. Not out of any, highfalutin ideas. I'd have a hot chocolate.
Inspired by our current Prime Minister, Theresa May, what is the naughtiest thing you did as a child?
I remember saying fuck for the first time in front of my mum, and I remember it really clearly. We were in Mayo on holidays, and it's something to do with Rolos. Do they still sell Rolos?
That's still a thing. We still have that.
Something, not like anything as obvious as the last Rolo, but it's something to do with Rolos. I remember it really clearly, and we were inside, and I'd said something like, "This is fucking ridiculous," or something. And I stormed outside, and it was raining. I remember thinking, this is really dramatic. I was just getting really wet. I didn't have anywhere to go. And I remember thinking, this is epic. And I didn't get in any trouble, weirdly, for that. I think because it was probably highly amusing.
Were you allowed to swear in your, like if you'd sworn in your house, would that have been
there was that sort of weird time around 13, 14, 15 where you start to sort of push it a bit, and then it becomes sort of acceptable. So a bit. Like not too strict, but not too non-strict.
2 left. Dogs or cats?
Oh, dogs.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
And finally, this would be a good segue actually. Favourite member of the royal family?
Oh my God. Who's in the royal family? Well, do you know? Because my sister is called Sarah, and I'm called Andrew. So when Sarah and Andrew, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson were getting married, and they were sort of really, sort of weirdly jolly, weren't they, when they came out? Well, you were probably a bit young, but they were sort of like so happy and sort of wacky. So I think I'll go for Sarah Ferguson. I saw her actually in a hotel recently. We weren't meeting each other, we just passed each other.
And you were like, you're my favourite.
That's not a member of the royal family, though, is it?
I think.
Is she?
Did she get excommunicated? I don't know if she did.
Yeah.
Maybe she did.
My Irishness is shining through. My lack of knowledge about the royal family.
We should talk about Hamlet, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Do you want to tell me your favourite before we do?
Of the member of the royal family?
Yeah.
At the moment, it's the Queen.
Yeah.
Purely because somebody told me a story about a week ago that she apparently was at a wedding, at some very posh wedding, and Dancing Queen came on, and apparently the Queen said, "I like this song because I like dancing, and I'm the Queen." I'm almost certain that story isn't true, but if it is true, she's my favourite.
Yeah.
But we were just talking about this, but we talked about the Queen quite a lot when we first started, right?
Yeah.
And talked about the royals and what it meant to be royal and what the context was. Because we started on this, what feels now like an age ago.
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago, wasn't it? And we'd sort of decided to work together.
Yeah.
But we hadn't decided on what play we would do. And we talked about a few plays. Talked about The Glass Menagerie, beautiful Tennessee Williams play. And were there any other ones?
We talked about some other Shakespeares as well that might float into the future rather than... But it was that lovely thing that happened where the conversation organically started to just settle over a few meetings, didn't it, on this one?
Yeah. And we did talk about the Princess Diana's funeral and those very startling images, and what it means in a modern context. It is quite an unusual thing because, you know, I come from a republic, and I do find the idea of having a royal family unusual in the sense that, I mean, I do see its value in a way, but playing a prince is sort of, it's kind of a hard thing to get a grip on, and I do believe that everybody is the same. So the idea that there's a sort of perfect family doesn't sit easy with me, particularly given that we didn't grow up with things like that in Ireland. But then that's what this play is about, isn't it? It's about the human being behind it.
That's right, and I think the scrutiny as well becomes more important than the status. It's the sense of being, Ophelia says that he's the observed of all observers. Yeah. And you do think that sense of what does it feel like to be watched and to be looked at the whole time, the play is really fascinated by and interested in. Yeah. I remember us looking on YouTube at the footage of that Diana funeral back in the Almeida rehearsal room, like way before we started. Yeah. And that idea of like, if you felt, because I suppose there's two extraordinary things in one of those moments. One is the public response to what happens when Diana dies. And I sort of have a feeling that in England, we find ourselves surprised by how much it turns out to mean. Like, my main memory of being a kid when Diana died was the sort of everyone being really surprised at how much of a huge deal it felt like. And the whole country just shut down. Yeah. But the second one is, what does it feel like to be those two kids? And that your mum's died. And to you, it's your mum's died, but there's also this whole massive other layer of it spread over the top. Yeah. But I feel like I can sort of understand. I understand a little bit in the past couple of years about scrutiny to a certain degree. I mean, I'm certainly not followed around by paparazzi or anything like that. Thank God. But you know, that idea of being looked at a bit more than I was before. I feel very grateful having worked in the theatre and for such a long time before I had any of that. Because you do find, and it's something I do think about in relation to Hamlet, I do think that when somebody is looking at you in a particular way, if you're not comfortable with what you're presenting them with, it can be very frightening, and that's very fluid because some days I'm okay with that, and some days I'm really not, like the way we all are. But people can find that hard to understand. Do you think it sort of changes the nature of what you're able to get away with? Like, do you think it means you can't make mistakes?
I find it very hard to. I think people can, as you know, the thing that drives me insane or and makes me angry instantly is rudeness, and people being dismissive or people being rude in any way. So I absolutely hold on to my right to be rude back when people are rude to me or rude to people that I'm with. Throw people out of the way, or say if they want to take a photograph, they just hand it to the person that you're having lunch with or something. And that's awful. And also, you know, I remember I did a play on Broadway with Julianne Moore and Bill Nye, and the culture over on Broadway is very much that people go and want to get their playbill signed. We have it a little bit here, but it's certainly big over there. And I remember so clearly coming out of the stage door and people just pushing you out of the way to get to the famous person. And I do think it's very, I do think it's very helpful. It's been very helpful to me to have gone through all those years of having none of that.
And then having it.
Because you're able to decide quietly what you're able to do artistically. And I've never been ashamed of calling myself an artist. I think that's sort of almost you say call yourself an artist now when you're an actor, that there's some sort of, I don't know, that's some sort of
sort of assumptive, yeah.
Assumptive or something.
Yeah.
But I think there's absolutely no shame in that. And but in relation to Hamlet, it's been in a way it's been helpful. I think I would have a completely different experience had I played this when I was 30 than I do when I'm now, because I do understand that a little bit more.
And I suspect the play wouldn't. It's a clever way of putting stakes on it, isn't it, for the writer?
Yeah.
Isn't it? You think, would it all be fine if this were just a normal family who weren't a royal family?
Yeah.
There's something about pointing the camera at them in the way the play does, and saying, well, I mean, it's going to be, you know, it's a big deal for anyone when their grandparents die, but when the Queen dies, that's going to have massive, like, we're all going to live through a different time.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that the Almeida, where we started and I'm based, you know, we did this play, Charles III, that was kind of really all about that, and kind of what are we all going to mean to ourselves when the way things have been since 1953 is gone and a new thing starts.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what's happened in this play, right? That's, you know, as far as the text suggests, old Hamlet's been around for a long time, and suddenly he's gone.
Yeah.
And gone completely, you know, even the public version that he's bitten by a snake in the garden is a total shock. It's not an illness and a decline and a, you know.
And I think the idea that it's one thing that we talked about a lot during rehearsal, is that the idea of communication within the family is very odd.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like that because everybody's going, why don't you, which happens in a lot of families, don't say that I've said this to you, but you know, and we all have that in families. Yeah. But usually we don't train cameras on each other, and you know, they do it in extremity in the play. But I do think it shows that people, certainly in this family, have a real inability or lack of interest in speaking directly in an emotional way. And I've said that a lot about, we've talked a lot about Hamlet in the sense that he's just grieving. That's to me that's the way I can relate to him. At the beginning of the play, he's just grieving, no more, no less. I think it's an extraordinary thing that's happened with his uncle and his mum. But I don't know, I partly think that might be okay if he was just given a bit of time.
Or if he was allowed to go, we said, I remember, at one point as well.
He was allowed to go.
Let him go back to Wittenberg.
Yeah.
He'd probably just get on with it. Because I suppose the problem with living here is that you can't, you know, if you've lived here all your life since you were a child, which the play suggests you have, you know, you remember Yorick and the feast and things. So there's a sort of very neatly and very lightly touched in, I think, sense of what the previous 30 years of Hamlet's life have been like living in this place.
Yeah.
But how can you ever escape the memories of how it was?
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of
exactly the same place.
Living in the house you lived in with your ex or something, and you just kind of go, this is the same thing, but with different cast.
Yeah, totally.
Because the other thing I suppose we, partly consciously and partly, I mean, we never talked about making decisions about things like, is he mad, or is the ghost real? Yeah. I think partly because the process we went through in the years leading up to starting rehearsals in January this year, to just read the play, was we got most excited about the bits where we didn't know. Yeah. And the bits where there is a problem where you think, well, okay, but if he's mad, then that might mean one thing, and if he isn't mad, that might mean a different thing. But actually, I remember you saying at one point, like, what's the definition of mad? Like, when do you cross the line into mad? And when does sad become mad?
Yeah, and there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah.
It's in the play. And you know, we should talk about the sort of famous play buzzer, because it was, you know, you're talking about it. Because the play is so famous, so much of what's interesting and compelling about drama is the sense of, I really don't know what's going to happen. And when the play is so famous, as Hamlet is, you forget that we don't know that the ghost he could be in every scene for the rest of the play. We don't know what he's going to say. We don't know that Ophelia and Hamlet could make up. We don't know that he's going to say, "Get thee to a nunnery." We don't know that in the closet.
Well, it's the Polonius, isn't it? That's the example where you've got the play makes no prep for it.
Absolutely no preparation for his death. And so we have this sort of buzzer this thing of, because it's so full of famous lines, that you go, the most important thing to think about is what was the intention behind those lines, and they certainly weren't about making the lines famous. They were about making them truthful and authentic. And that's what I think we tried to reclaim a little bit in this production.
Did you feel a lot of the sort of, I mean, you'd done no professional Shakespeare, or like a tiny bit?
A little tiny bit.
A little tiny bit?
Yeah.
None in theatre?
None in theatre, no.
And so, when we sort of said, okay, we're going to do it, and we started to pencil in some dates, how did that feel?
I literally, when you sort of think that, it was making me feel nervous again. I'm like, when are we doing this? I can't do that. Yeah, it's been the biggest, that's the thing we were just talking about there. It's been the biggest journey, and the thing that I really feel proud of, and I feel very strongly about it, that I suppose because I've done a lot of plays. I've been in the theatre for 20 years, and lots of new plays and old plays and various different types of plays. And I feel to a certain degree accomplished in that way. But I definitely did think that there might be something within Shakespeare that I didn't possess. Because I don't really still understand entirely what iambic pentameter is. Or I don't, those kind of rules I find a little bit frightening because I didn't train. But then I've always loved words, and when I was a kid, when I was 15 or 16, we used to do these drama competitions called the Fesh in Ireland, and you would do excerpts from Richard III or Merchant of Venice or King John and all these ones, and I loved them. And I, as a kid, I had an understanding of it, even though I understood the rhythm of it, and I understood that it was very actable, even though I didn't understand
what a bodkin was.
What a bodkin was, exactly. And I think that's very important. And for some reason, maybe consciously or unconsciously, I veered towards new writing or stuff that away from Shakespeare or classical theatre to a certain degree. But now, having done this and really understanding that, of course, it has a rhythm, like all plays do, but it's the most actable stuff and pleasurable stuff to act. It doesn't feel intimidating. And I love the idea that there's been such a huge diversity of audiences, of people who are genuinely going. And I can genuinely, this isn't just PR speak, I genuinely feel that people understand. Even if they don't understand every word, you understand the rhythm and the feeling. So having done this for nearly 20 weeks, I feel like incredibly passionate about his great genius and how it shouldn't be kidnapped by the academic world.
It feels to me like there's a whole lot of the conversation about Shakespeare that has that in it, even down to this, like, well, he couldn't possibly have written the plays because he didn't go to university. And you think, well, the whole thing has been claimed by a kind of academic discipline.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember having that moment in rehearsals where the first line of Speak the Speech, I pray you as I pronounced it to you, and saying, I think it, like, you could just say that to mean, say it just as if I was talking to you.
Yeah.
And the way that that's normally done in British theatre, at least, is that we say, speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, as if Hamlet's saying, I did it right when I read it all to you, so can you take my line reading?
Yeah.
And there's a sort of, in that, I think, really extraordinary, weird chunk in the middle of a play in which the writer seems to address how
to act.
The
how
execution
not to
of,
act.
exactly. The word poetry doesn't appear.
No.
The word verse doesn't appear. The word the phrase iambic pentameter doesn't appear. In fact, Shakespeare would not have known what that was.
Yeah.
And it's strange to me. I mean, I understand it, but I also find it really strange that we've allowed this writer, as far as we know, who never spent a single moment of his life thinking about things being published. Ben Jonson spent ages before he died getting his plays together in the right editions so they could be beautifully published, so they'd survive him. And the collected Shakespeare is published 7 years after his death by his mates.
Yeah.
And they forget one and have to put it in so it isn't in the contents page and it goes in and it isn't in there. But you realise from that, I think, that the guy wrote sheet music for actors.
Yeah.
And was a practical person of the theatre and the audience and the way that those two things could interrelate.
Yeah.
And I find it so strange. We've turned it into a thing that if you say, what is Shakespeare, you go onto the street and say to somebody, what is Shakespeare acting like? And they'll kind of do exactly the thing that Hamlet's advice to the players says, don't do that.
Yeah, and something that you said I thought was really like the way that you say, what think you want? Which is the equivalent of us saying, he isn't rather than he is not. It's to colloquialize it. But now it's been turned into what think you ought, which is this sort of weird way of, so that what actually the absolute opposite of his intention. For some, we sort of gift wrapped it and sold it as something that isn't for somebody else, and it isn't for everybody, just for a certain. And for me, going into it, because I suppose because it hasn't been part of my cultural life in the sense that I haven't studied it, and so there's words in it. The words in it are so beautiful. I always think of this when he talks to Horatio and he says, "Thou art even as just a man as e'er my conversation coped withal." So thou art even as just a man as e'er my conversation. I'm a bit like, what? But when he says the word coped and thou, Horatio, we know immediately. You go, Horatio, thou art, and so it's that there's certain keys in certain words that open up the whole feeling as well as the sense.
And also the whole image of that you go, my conversation, of all the people I've talked to, you're the one my conversation copes with the best.
Yeah.
As if the practice of talking to other people is a matter of getting through.
Yeah.
And the word choice is extraordinary. That's what you're saying.
Exactly, the word choice is so genius. And you can say the word cope, and every single person will go. And of course, you say the word fardels, and people go, what the fuck? So I don't know. For me, that's a way in it, and even doing it, having done it so many times now, I still think, oh my God, there's that word as well. It's extraordinary. Really is extraordinary.
I think rhythmically as well, you're right. It's such a complex. They're sort of like magic spells, Shakespeare plays, in that they have a rhythmic authority, which is nothing really to do with the story. Like it feels like in any language you could make those sounds and you'd go, oh, that sounds like it's really sayable.
Yeah.
And I sometimes, it sort of makes me sad a lot that we pretend that that's not true.
Yeah.
And we've invented this idea of verse speaking, which I suspect he wouldn't have known what that was. And to be honest, I don't really know what that is in terms of, sometimes you get people saying things like, I didn't think the verse speaking was very good. And I always think, I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
And of course, there's this crazy idea that you should stop at the end of every line for a little tea break. Which, I kind of, that is as bizarre to me as kind of taking a piece of Mozart or an Eminem song and every 4 beats taking a break. Like you murder the rhythm of it. You turn it into a kind of soporifically repetitive rhythmic structure, which the beauty of it is, it isn't, because you look at the soliloquies and actually half the time the sense pours along off the end of the lines into the next thing.
Yeah, it's inarticulate. He writes dialogue, the way human people, absolutely expertly. So to sort of reduce it into a sort of thing is so, it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
I remember you saying at one point, when we were talking about the play within the play, and Gertrude says, "Come hither, my dear Hamlet, sit by me," and he says, "No." I remember you saying, "I'm looking forward to that now."
Yeah.
But I suppose that speaks a bit to the way we approached it. I don't remember us ever having a conversation about deciding to approach it like this. It was just sort of the way it happened.
No.
But it was always through character, right? More than through...
I do think there's a thing, I think often the very last word in the sentence helps. And I don't know, but that for somebody else could be completely different. This is just for me. And I do think the idea of antithesis is sometimes works. That example that I use...
Here it comes.
Here it comes. What is it? The power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a boil than the force of honesty can translate beauty into his likeness. If you just say, well, if you don't show the antithesis of both those ideas, then I don't think you get the full. And I think that's sometimes helpful. So there are things that are helpful, but
I suspect that's the same as
in any play. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and some of the stuff we
All writers have rhythm. All writers have rhythm. And for some reason...
That was a very rhythmic way of saying that.
Like, you know, if I were to think of Simon Stevens, who have done a few of his plays, or Mike Bartlett, I might think if there were 50 books written on this is the way you have to say Simon Stevens' work.
Yeah.
It would be a terrible tragedy for Simon's work, because the whole thing is that it would make it the absolute opposite of what his intention would be, which is, well, let's see what... And people will have a different way of speaking. I hope in 50 years they look at the way I speak this, or the way we all speak this in this production, and think, that's a bit. That's a bit.
I hope so.
You know, I hope they do, because the way we speak has to develop. And in 2050, I hope they think, geez, that was a bit...
That was old-fashioned.
That was old-fashioned, because it should.
Yeah.
Because our ways of speaking with music and the way culture develops. You know, rap didn't exist when Laurence Olivier was doing it. I don't know, there's just all these things that we're just listening to every day that... or do you know what I also think? I think reality television, you know, this idea of high art and low art always sort of disgusts me. I mean, I know there's some things that are just, you know, trash television, but there are things, but there are things like at the beginning stages of when... I can't remember, the famous Big Brother. When Big Brother came on, and there'd be somebody eating a sandwich in a badly lit room, and they're going, "I'm going to fucking tell that bitch tomorrow what I think of her." And they would cut to that bitch in bed, asleep, with that infrared camera. Then they'd go up to her, and you think, "I'm going to check this out tomorrow night," because they made drama out of something. I'm not saying that that's high art. I'm not saying that at all. But it is compelling, and the way that they speak and the way we would watch something, the way you would watch a drama, has to influence the way people
structure narrative experience.
Absorb narrative experience. You know what I mean? So that stuff, whether you would deem that as trashy or not, in some way has to be absorbed.
It's also like back to the famous play buzzer, though, isn't it? It's like the centrality of, if you watch a story, you don't want the story to go exactly the way you know it'll go.
No, yeah.
Like, the pleasure of all stories is surprise.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you watch First Dates or whatever, you're looking for them to do something you didn't expect them to do. And if it's all like a Richard Curtis movie and everybody just behaves along the tracks that were set up in the first 5 seconds, that's kind of fine, but you're not going to tell your friends because it's just what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I suppose is the other thing about Shakespeare that, and I never felt that more than when we had really young audiences, but as in when that week when there was, I remember you talking about the week of under 25s, Hamlet for free. Them being surprised by some of the corners in the story.
That was just so exciting.
Yeah.
Because people who actually don't know the play at all, you go, oh my God, this is... And that's the way we should treat the play.
Absolutely. Well, that's where when I first did Shakespeare, I did it at home in Stockton-on-Tees. And I think we surveyed and found out that like 85% or something crazy of that audience didn't know the play.
Yeah.
And were coming in with no knowledge of the story, which meant both that they didn't have any real respect for it or reverence. They were like, okay, let's see what this is like.
Yeah.
If it's boring, I'm going home.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, it made you re-see the play, because when you watch Midsummer Night's Dream and the bit where he gets turned into a donkey and has sex with her, the Northeast audience were like, what is this? And like, I remember watching it and thinking, actually, they're totally right. This is weird. Like, this is crazy. And there's so many bits in Shakespeare which we have turned into either. And I remember we talked about this quite a lot for this, didn't we? About like tragedies are sad, therefore sad.
Oh, like, I mean, totally. It's such a funny play, this. It really is funny. People, there are things in it that are just so witty about the way human beings relate to each other. And if there is no comedy or lightness or love or any of the best things in life, there is no tragedy. If it's just coming out and you just see this moody Dane going, this is terrible. You think, well, no wonder you want to kill yourself. I do too. You know what I mean? You have to think, what was it like before? Where was the life that you
so
got this
key,
life?
What was it like before?
What was it like
Yeah,
before?
yeah.
And also the big thing I think and this is a testament to you, is that the play is called Hamlet, and it's a great part for
a handsome leading actor.
for the person who plays Hamlet, but the other characters are really extraordinary as well, and I think the paying attention to the love between Gertrude and Claudius, and the relationship between Laertes and Ophelia and Polonius, and the loss of their mother, and who are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and Hamlet? What is their relation? And just have all those, because if they are vivid and brilliantly acted as they are in the play, it makes the central
100%.
character just the ambiguity of and the reliability of the central character come to question, because if you think, actually, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have a point. They're just coming here to help out their friend, and they haven't done anything wrong. And if the actors stand up for their characters, then you go, yeah, I can. And that's when people become gripped, and that's because people relate to it, because it's not black and white and there aren't these stock characters that we go, there's Claudius, he's a villain. We're supposed to feel nothing for him. And
It's also sort of stock interpretations as well, right? That you kind of go, and again, it takes quite a lot of discipline to try and get your head out of this place. But where you come to a play like this and you're aware that there are certain colours people always paint certain walls. Do you know what I mean? That you kind of go, Claudius is always bad. Gertrude is often cold, sometimes drunk.
Yeah.
Ophelia is normally just like left right on the sidelines and never feels like she kind of counts very much by at least when I'd seen it and experienced it. And I suppose one of the things that I think you did very, very naturally, which I suspect is kind of a thing you would do on a new play in the same way, is to go, where have I come from? Like, what was it like before?
Yeah.
And I always remember that there was an afternoon it was quite late on, and we were supposed to be rehearsing the closet scene with Julia, and we never said a word of the scene, because I think we started on, what do you think their relationship was like before? And then that was 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we never said a word of the scene.
Yeah.
I remember you going home going, that was a really useful afternoon, slightly terrified that you hadn't talked about it. But I do think I think that's absolutely true, because you think, well, one of the reasons he's such an extraordinary writer is because he has the ability to see the same situation from lots and lots of vantage points.
Yeah.
And if you are, I think the play remains, the great questions in the play about, did Claudius kill his brother? Is the ghost real? Is Hamlet mad? And like the way you answer any one of those three affects the other two and fundamentally shifts the whole story.
Yeah.
And I think in all three cases we have tried, who knows how successfully, but we've tried to kind of gift the audience those problems and say, the problems are actually more fun than if we solve them for you.
Absolutely.
And say, here's our version. He's crazy, or he's not crazy. And like it's what's fascinating about that then is if you treat it like that, you end up in a place of going, okay, so if I'm Claudius, why would I kill my brother if I did? And the only reason to kill someone's brother, the only reason to kill your brother and then marry the wife is presumably if you know that the wife would marry you before you killed your brother, if that makes sense. So there's history implied even in the accusation of that crime, never mind the fact of it. And suddenly you start to see a different story, and you start to think, what has Claudius been doing in this palace? When it was Hamlet and Dad Hamlet and Mom and the Polonius family, and presumably he's never married and has never had kids and has just been living like one of those royals we can't remember. You know, not on the front of the papers, but absolutely there, and still is a person and still has a full emotional life and still has things he cares about and people that he loves. And yet, you know, the way we often treat the play is to kind of treat it as if it doesn't have any roots that go deeper than its surface.
Yeah. There's times in playing doing the play, the word is ugly. I feel some of the scenes I find quite ugly because they're upsetting. A lot of the stuff with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern I find really upsetting because it's about friendship and it's about people, you know. And it's the brilliance of the writing because you feel like this, because I can still be absolutely have the courage of my convictions of the characters' convictions, but I can also see where they're coming from as well. That's the way we feel in life. You think you're just always doubting, and it's very complex as well. And as it's something you said when I was really tired at one point during the first run, that the character sort of. He can take tiredness. He can sort of take whatever way you are. And that's a sign of a really great... You know, it doesn't fall apart if... There's lots of different ways
it's not brittle, is it? There's like lots of routes through the map. And that's kind of extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, gives everybody... I always feel this about Shakespeare, that it's such a shame. I mean, another thing that is true of this show is that I quite often... in fact, I did it last week. I sometimes come in and just do some notes, but I will only note the person I'm noting. So I don't get them all together and say, OK, I think we should change these moves. I might go up to Luke and say, you've been doing that bit on the sofa like that for ages. Or say to Andrew, I think there's maybe a different route through that. Try this. But I won't tell everybody so that they're surprised by things that happen live on the night. And there's quite a bit of it, right, where you stand in different places night on night. Oh,
every single night. It's, for me, if it's not willfully different.
No, but live.
But it should be. We're not sitting here going, OK, you picked up your bottle last night when I said we started. You know, that's not the way. So we shouldn't hold on. There's nothing worse. Like any actor will tell you that they hate when you feel like an actor isn't listening to you because they want to go back to the way that because it's just fear-based and you can't. And
that's right.
It's not live to what you're actually doing, and it's maybe a slight. Reverence towards success or a need towards the approval of the audience. And I actually think what the audience really respond to is a sense of, oh my God, they're in a way ignoring us, apart from the soliloquies where conversely you have to be right there. You know, as you know, tonight when I do the soliloquies, it has to be as live as the way I'm talking to you now because there's no difference. You know what I mean? Whereas now the convention is, I'm able to see you, and so why should that not be when he's talking directly to the audience in the play? You speak into a black sort of abyss. It's sort of weird.
I set you the challenge at the Almeida of getting someone to answer a question in the sort of...
Which I did.
100%.
Yeah. When I say, am I a coward? It happened in was it a preview? I said, am I a coward? Which is in one of the... And this woman was like, no. It's brilliant.
It was sort of involuntary as well, wasn't it? It was like genuinely answering the question.
Yeah, no. She hadn't thought about it.
Yeah.
Get on with it.
I think I'm getting a signal that we have like 10 minutes. So I think we should. That was fast, wasn't it?
Yeah.
21 performances left.
Yeah.
21 left. Okay, should we take some questions? We'll take some questions. Wave at us. I'm going to have to repeat your question back so everyone can hear. Hello, ladies down here.
You talked about posing questions rather than answering them, and I wondered if that's something you explored with Polonius, because his vacancy seems less like he's just a comedy figure. There seems to be a little bit more of a nuance to it in the introduction in particular. I wonder if that's a question you're answering or asking.
So that's a question about Polonius and that he seems less like a comedy figure, and did we continue to pose questions about him rather than answer them? Yes, we did, but we have the brilliant Peter White, who I was so thrilled when he signed up to this gig, because finding older actors who have worked loads and loads and loads, sometimes they just don't want to be directed. And when you find someone who really does want to be directed and join the company and like go on an adventure, for a director of a play like this, it's the best feeling in the world, and he is so wonderful. But
he's amazing.
I sort of don't believe there are any such thing as comedy characters in good plays, in the same way I don't think there are comedy people in real life. Apart from maybe Richard from Richard and Judy. But I think you have to give each character a fair hearing and sort of go, where is he coming from? And yes, he's got bad points, but also he really loves his kids. And like, again, just really simply structurally, why do his kids get so upset when he dies if he's a really horrible, horrible man?
Yeah, or an idiot.
Yeah, or an idiot, or he feels non-plausible to the audience.
Well, he's no more a comedy character than Hamlet is a tragic character. What happens to Hamlet is tragic. But he's not a tragic figure. The reason it's so awful is because he's so full of life. And exactly the same with Polonius, that it's not just like, oh, you can just sort of laugh at me. I think maybe sometimes it's just because it's sometimes easier to understand what Polonius says or something. I don't know. But it's really true that that's not the way human beings are.
It's also that Shakespeare's character writing is so specific. So like all of them sound different and they all talk in different structures. And Polonius does this weird thing where he lists pastoral, comical, tragical. And I remember when first meeting Peter saying, I think there's anxiety in that. I think there's real anxiety in that will to go, okay, he right at that beginning of the scene that we call the audition scene, when he comes in the morning and says, I think I figured it out, he says, for about 20 minutes, he says, I'm going to be really quick. I'm going to be really quick, because if you're not quick, then people get annoyed with you for not being quick, and I don't want to be annoying, so I'm just going to be quick, okay? Quick. And like in that structure, you hear somebody who is losing confidence. And in fact, he says it a few times in the scene. He says, well, I'm not as sharp as I used to be if that's not true. And you think, if you've got that thought, like, you know, that's got its roots somewhere. So yes, that's absolutely yes. Ask us more. Gentleman down here.
Andrew, you said that you felt really proud about this, and I'm amazed to hear you say that. I think it's wonderful that you said that, because I think it's one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen on stage.
Oh, thank you.
But I think a couple of things that really make it so for me are just one is the conversational style that you have with the audience, and the second is I think you tease us. I think Robin probably did part of you as well. You tease us with this sad, mad. Is it depression or is it? What is it? Did that form part of a strategy at the outset when you were deciding to do it this way, or did it evolve organically? You're making most things sound as though it kind of evolved as you went along.
So the question is, was it a strategy that you teased the audience with different possible solves, I suppose? Is that fair to what might be going on?
No, it definitely wasn't a strategy. I think why it's so brilliant, they all have, every scene is kind of really different. One of the things I remember us talking was that the idea of him murdering somebody, like the way I would feel about murdering somebody. If I killed somebody, and I'd never killed anybody before in my life.
He's killed loads of people. He's killed loads of people.
Imagine this scenario. I would be forever altered. And sometimes I think what happens is...
It's so good.
Is when he comes back from England, he's sort of like... Or after he kills Polonius, that he's sort of the same kind of, you know, princey kind of guy. And I don't believe that can't have some sort of effect on you. So, I mean, that was one thing that I think he has to be in some way different when he comes back from England.
I remember I was talking a lot about death as the size of death as a life event versus the size of death in most Shakespeare plays.
Yeah.
Like, often characters are picked off in Shakespeare plays, and it's really like nothing has happened.
It doesn't really
And
matter.
we spent a lot of time, didn't we, on going that scene, particularly that scene with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern afterwards, where they say, "Where's the dead body?"
Yeah.
And that's when the initial shock has come down, and he's covered in someone else's blood, and it's someone who he loved, and what's happened now? Like, where do we go next? And so often I think death in Shakespeare is, I don't know, it's like kind of putting your clothes on in the morning. Do you know what I mean? It's like such and such dies. All right.
Yeah, I'm sort of used to that. But the you know, it's the thing about mental health again. He's going through a very turbulent time in his life, and I think any time I've gone through a turbulent time in my life, it's not even. You know, you feel uneven, and so you try and solve things by putting some sort of disposition on, whether it's an antic disposition or not, so that you go, yeah, you know what, I am in great form. I'm just a party guy now, or I'm just going to stay in the duvet, or I'm going to try and solve this intellectually, or else, no, you know what, I'm really into, yoga, or, and I think all those things can really exist. And at a time when you are questioning everything about the world, even whether to be alive or not, I think you put on a lot of different things. And why it's such a great part is that it's so far-reaching, because there's so many different relationships you play. He's a student, and he's a lover, and he's a prince, and he's a son, and he's I feel like that Alanis Morissette song. But he's a lot of different things, and so there's a great pleasure in rather than trying to sort of iron them all out and make it actually to just be what you are in that moment, and then some of the parts make the whole.
Well, then you don't have to play the same character in every scene. In a sense,
no, you don't.
right?
No, exactly.
Because the way people are with their mums is completely different to the way they are when they're in a shop.
Yeah.
And again, we often, we sort of have I suppose sometimes a kind of silly view of that when it comes to doing theatre, and we kind of go, I'm playing this person who has one attribute.
Yeah.
Or two attributes. They're this or this. So
particularly if it's a famous play.
Right. Then you go, he's moody, or he's
yeah.
sad, or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure we never gave it an outside label, did we? We just sort of, piece by piece, went through the relationships.
I think you said a thing to me which was incredibly helpful, which was, you're sounding just a little bit Shakespeare-y. And I do understand what that means. Where you can sort of go and you think, I think this is something that I've heard before.
Right.
And it sounds respectable, but I don't really, it's sort of like, to go, well, no, what is it? Because it's me who's playing this part, and I genuinely feel the great good fortune of having a leasehold of it for such a small amount of time. Even though sometimes it feels like a long amount of time.
On matinee days.
On matinee days. But if I'm not going to bring who I am to it, it's like any great piece of art. If you don't put your own signature on it, then what's the point? And so it's amazing that people have responded to the production in the way that they have, because it is so personal. It is really.
But that's what makes it exciting.
Oh well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Ask us another one. You were early. Go on.
Turning 13, I've had some difficult and emotional times, and I wanted to know what advice you'd give to your 13-year-old selves, and what advice you think Hamlet would give to his 13-year-old self.
So that was, what advice would we give to our 13-year-old selves, and what advice would Hamlet give to his 13-year-old self?
I'm going to think about that carefully. You can only be where you are, you can only be where you are, and well, let me get this right. I feel like, there's a thing that you're told, I think, when you're a younger person. There's a thing about, it's going to get better, and someday you'll have more power, or you'll have greater responsibility, or all that kind of stuff. And that's not very helpful, I think, to some people to hear. You think, well, what about now? What about today? I feel terrible. And that sort of continues for the rest of your life. But I think I think the thing that I've learned is that if you feel a little bit different to people, everybody in the world, I think, it's the thing that I think makes great drama and makes the best people in the world. Everybody is in some way vulnerable. And I think the most unhappy people in the world are the people who don't present any vulnerability at all. And so being an adult, I think, this is only really in the past couple of years I've sort of even begun to understand that. The actual, what if I were to define what being an adult is the comfort with which we can say, I don't know. Because I think sometimes when you're an adult, you are told to say, I know now. I know, do you know why I know? Because I've got a mortgage, and I've got money, and I've got power, and I've got success, all the stuff that when you're 13 you don't have. And I think so much about being an actor is about playing, which children or young people are so good at, and we move so far away from that. And so I think the tragedy for a lot of people as they grow older is that they think, I have to know, and I have to know 100%. And actually, I think what you have to hold on to and try and be comfortable with is the sometimes uncomfortable situation of saying, I don't know. And when I say that it continues like that for the rest of your life, I think I just mean that no one ever really knows for sure anything. You can believe and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that sounds a little obscure, but even if people present to you that they are full of surety, they really aren't, you know, on certain things.
That's good.
I don't know.
I can't top that. I'm going to leave him to answer your question. Guy with his hand up over there.
Yeah, you said that Hamlet's quite personal to you, but how do you relate to him personally? Like, some people might say that from a modern perspective he's quite privileged. Like he says, I think it's, I should have fattened you with his cuts for this slaves novel. Like, he's a prince, like, bad things happen to people all the time.
Yeah.
Quite bad.
Yeah.
How do you relate to Hamlet personally?
That's like a weird thing to say, but I can't even really separate him from, because he doesn't exist.
Spoiler, total spoiler.
Well, you know what I mean. He actually, there is no real Hamlet. Am I allowed to say that?
You can say that. Yeah, that's fine.
You know, there really isn't. It's just, he's just like a jug, and you pour in whoever the thing, and then you have a drink. This metaphor is not going anywhere. But you know, and I know what you mean about this sort of the state of, because he's a prince, and how can anyone relate to, you know, like that sort of like high class problems. I think that's where the world is in such a state of chassis, is because we go, oh, because that person has lots of money or lots of power, that they have to be unhappy, when we know actually that's not true, you know. So
I suspect it doesn't make it any easier losing your mum if you're Prince Harry. I think it probably still hurts according to you and who you are and what your relationship was with that person. And I think it's sort of, I suspect for any really great actor, it's really hard for you to play princeness. Do you mean as an abstract quality, it's unplayable, because all you can do is play a person who's in a situation and who seems to operate. And I mean, and this company is glorious at this, but particularly with Shakespeare, I sort of repeatedly say that there are, you know, yes, there are 3 million ways that you can get it wrong, but there are 30 million in which you can get it right, which is to say, there's not one route through. And so every night, different bits of it light up differently according to what night it is. You know, the first night we were here was after the general election, and the line, the election lights on Fortinbras brought the house down. Which is, you know, which is to say you're cooking food that is fresh and live, and it depends who's there in the restaurant and what's happened in the world. And that itself is kind of exciting, I think. How long have we got? About 5 minutes over. Okay. We'll take one more question from that lady down there. Yeah.
Robert, can you talk a bit about your process? Because there's a lot of talk about acting, but how do you go about directing? What's your process, and how do you see the role of the director?
Oh God, I'm 5 minutes over. What is?
I'm going to go and get you.
How do I see the role of director? What is my I mean, the thing is, I don't really have a process, and I have, I suspect, a fairly severe sense of being an imposter about this, because I didn't train. Nobody ever taught me how to direct or to write. In fact, it's just things that I did from when I was quite little, and I think I don't understand how anyone can have the same. And I have real admiration for people who do, but I don't understand how anyone can do the same thing on different plays. Because it seems to me that you walk in on the first day of Hamlet, and for some of those people in the room, it is their first ever day in a rehearsal room. For some of those people, it is their first ever day in a rehearsal room on a Shakespeare play. For some of those people, it is their first ever day in a rehearsal room with me. For some of them, it isn't their first ever day in a rehearsal room with me. For some of them, we've been going for 2 years already on this particular play and this particular part, and I've been WhatsApping him photographs of the set design. So, like, it's you can only really do what's right there in front of you. And I don't even remember what we did on the first few days of Hamlet, but I tend to I don't let them sit around the table. So there are some things that are kind of the same, i.e. I don't like tables. I don't like a whole deal of chatting about it. I tend to make the whole company do a couple of days together, which I think we did, didn't we? We did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And we did some improv work on grief and on families and on just to sort of get the company together and to sense a terrain. But because it's a bit like kind of going, if you were going to organise a Christmas dinner for your family, or for your partner's family, or for your best friend's family, how would you do it differently? And of course the answer is you do it completely differently, because everybody's idea of Christmas is different, and you're in a different room, and you've got a whole lot of different people. So you have to try and be as honest as possible to who they are and what the thing is that you're trying to build. And sometimes that's about giving people the courage to stay away from the bad version, and being prepared to say things like, you're a bit Shakespeare-y, or sorry about that.
Isn't it? It's like what you're saying. It's that I don't know-ness again. That you have to start and go. That's what was so brilliant about this experience with you, was that you're open to there isn't something. You didn't stop something from emerging, and you have to, in order for something to emerge, you have to stop by saying I don't know, rather than I know. This is what we're going to do. This is. I mean, we have ideas, but everybody has ideas.
And they're only ever as good as the way they test. So sometimes you have great ideas that feel like the best ideas ever when you're talking about them. And there was some on this, what we talked about and we were so wedded to, and then we jumped them. And you have to be up for that, because I think if there were a recipe, someone would have figured it out by now. And the problem is the times keep changing, and the things we thought wouldn't happen, and the way you thought your life was going to go isn't the way it necessarily goes, and those things are all fine. But that means that you end up we both went through quite big life stuff in those 2 years.
Yeah.
And we're slightly different people at the other end of talking about the end of this process than we were when we first signed up to do it.
Yeah.
And actually, all of that stuff goes in the jug, doesn't it? To pick up that metaphor again, it all feeds in, and you talk about that. But of course, the different people you've got in the room are going to govern the way that goes. I have only one rule about it, really, which is that I think whatever's wrong with the rehearsal room or the tech or the production is you. So like, if you're the director and it isn't funny because you're not funny. Do you know what I mean? Or if they're stressed or they're anxious or whatever, you're bringing that to the room. And so you always have to, a bit like Oedipus, kind of get to know yourself first. Do you know what I mean? Like, look to yourself for the problem before you try and find it in somebody else. We should stop so you can go and play Hamlet.
Yeah. When's that, tonight?
That's tonight. That's tonight. As you can see, we're very, very happy to chat about it. We love chatting about it, but thank you for coming to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.